Yakov Darlan Khan here, and this evening or today, depending when you're watching this, my guest is Matthew Green, who is a journalist who's written an extraordinary book called Aftershock. And he was a journalist for Reuters, for the Financial Times, was based in Afghanistan, has had extraordinary experience, which led to him writing this book, which is, what's the subtitle of your book?
It's called Fighting War, Surviving Trauma and Finding Peace. So it's about British soldiers searching for new ways to heal from post-traumatic stress.
An extraordinary subject and so important. I think we're only just beginning to recognize the effect of trauma long-term, whether it's from war or whether it's from what one of my teachers used to call the child wars. We're just beginning to recognize how deep that runs and what an effect it has on our day-to-day lives. So I'm really honored to have you here tonight. Tell us something a little bit about what you're up to.
Well, I'm very much focused on looking at new ways of transforming trauma. In many ways, this was a new subject to me when I started the book. I was very much a conventional correspondent working overseas. Mm-hmm. But I've been on a personal mission, I suppose, in terms of my own development, but also looking at what we can do as a society to better support survivors of trauma, whether they be soldiers or civilians. And it's obviously through that my own journey, we met a couple of years back, and I've become exposed to your work, and also the power of shamanism more broadly. And I think it's such an incredibly exciting a way of thinking about healing, and particularly healing the way trauma is trapped in the body. And I wondered if you could kind of help me put into words exactly how that works. Because I think, in our contemporary culture, we think of trauma as being something in the mind. We think of it as in terms of memories, in terms of negative patterns of thinking. Yeah. But I think even mainstream psychiatry is now recognizing that actually trauma is something that's in the body.
Well, absolutely, because the body has a way of remembering, a little bit like, if you injure the body will go into spasm in order to protect that injured area. And then we'll build up scar tissue and will basically do what it needs to do to be able to go on functioning whilst protecting you from the damage that's been done. And it does the same. The body does exactly the same with trauma. And you only have to think about the effect, like how a human being feels in their body when they are in a traumatic situation. There is an incredible amount of tension. Some people survive by leaving the body, or like the mind goes AWOL.
Yeah, dissociation, as it's called technically, right? Yeah,
it's dissociation, and that's a very profound thing. And the body is left to fend for itself, but the body remembers. And so this understanding and this recognition that the muscle, the tissue, the fluid of the body, the complexity of the body is capable of building scar tissue around experience, but it limits our capacity then, because we're like it's a bit like, you could have an extraordinary car. Let's think about an environmentally friendly car like a Tesla. So you could have an incredible Tesla that was only running on 15% of its capacity.
Yeah.
The rest is in shock, or the rest is just not available. And the more trauma, the less available we are. And that is literally held in the muscles. So through our work, through movement medicine, we're helping people to be able to find safe ways to re-inhabit the landscape of their body, to connect with the place that's underneath trauma, where there is health in the system, and to put the physical body in the hands of that part of our intelligence, which we describe as the dancer. We describe that as the movement of life, the intelligence that's living the body, that keeps the system alive. And that system is movement. Through meditation, through concentration, we're able to give the shoulders, the elbows, the hands, the hips, the backbone, the knees, the feet back to the rhythm, and let the body be moved we come into contact quite quickly with that health that's underneath all trauma, and that it gives us a route from which we can then approach the trauma that's in the body, and step by step, because it's important to do this step by step, because if you step immediately just into the center of your trauma, that leads to, as you know, re-traumatization. So you must be able to take a little piece of frozen material out of the freezer, work with that, so it's about balance. It's about putting more weight on where there is health in the system, and from that place that is present now, being able to approach step by step where there is trauma, whether it's from war, whether it's from the extraordinary amount of abuse that is present in our world, emotional and physical and sexual abuse, all of these things. And we're just beginning to understand, I think, how widespread that is and how necessary it is to come into a better relationship with the body and its own capacity to heal.
Well, I think it's extraordinary, like you say, how much we're carrying as a society, psychically and physically, in terms of trauma, whether it's our own experience or experiences that have cascaded down through the generations. And you have some really striking descriptions of that in your book. And I think I've been fortunate enough to experience a few sessions of movement medicine over the past few years, which I found incredibly powerful, even the brief tasters that I've had.
Because I was drawn to the world of shamanism, and because shamanism has been pretty much wiped out in the European lands by all kinds of different methods, many very brutal. I had to, in order to discover what shamanism was, I had to go and work with indigenous people where shamanism was still intact as a day-to-day, matter-of-fact part of the way that human beings live in balance with themselves, each other, and their environment. And so I was lucky enough to meet and work with a lot of indigenous shamans. And one of the things I noticed is that healing in indigenous society is a community affair. It's not that one person has suffered and then they go off into a locked room and they work with one person and the suffering happens there, but there's a recognition that where there is suffering in the system, in the community, that belongs to the whole community as work to be done in order to find healing. Shamans were the original system thinkers. They were the ones who recognized that each individual thread of a community is what creates the health or otherwise in that community. So illness was considered a collective thing. It was not just the individual's responsibility. It's the community's responsibility. So we have translated that into very down-to-earth and practical ways of being able to be yourself connected to the power of your own energy, your own life force, and be in community, be in connection with a wider field. And in that, the healing lands where the healing needs to happen. And it's considered, or we consider that, to be something that belongs to all of us. You know, the fact that there's so much need for healing is not an individual's problem.
Yeah.
It's a collective problem.
Yeah, because that's part of the problem, isn't it? In our kind of contemporary culture, we're almost programmed to feel that if we're suffering with depression or anxiety or even trauma, we feel that it's somehow our own fault, and that we have to fix ourselves so we can kind of fit back into the societal machine. Whereas actually, arguably, society is what's sick, and maybe often these kind of symptoms are our soul calling us to look at our lives and kind of open a door to some other higher dimension of ourselves. Movement medicine is a kind of technology for doing that.
Yeah, it is, and it's come out of myself and Susanna, my wife's journey over 30
Yeah,
years of study, both Western and scientific ways of understanding how change happens. That this whole new body of work that's around neuroplasticity, around
yeah,
perception, all of
yeah,
these things are fascinating scientific ways of looking at how we can work with the story that we tell, and therefore the perception we have of life, and therefore our experience of life. And what I find interesting is movement medicine is a blend of both ancient and modern understanding of healing, of finding purpose, of recognizing who we are and what we have inside us, and the value of that to our community, to the world we live in. And because we, as a culture, we've lost a sense of deeper meaning, this idea that the meaning of life is all about the next upgrade of your, the next download of whatever it is that you think is going to make your life easier. It's been shown to be manifestly untrue in terms of a path towards human contentment. We're suffering from massive levels of anxiety, depression, unhealed trauma, and we are, because of that, we are threatening our own existence because of our way of life. And there's a kind of madness in that, and one of my favorite descriptions of madness is to keep on doing the same things and expect different results. And we're in need as human beings of a deeper meaning, a deeper purpose in life that we can connect to, that's real for us, that's not based in how much I can grab and how much I can take, but that's based on the human heart, on connection, on the value that we each have, and the recognition and the uplifting of that, the development of that. So how our education could lead to, rather than an ability to regurgitate what other people think about what other people think, could lead to a sense of who we actually are, our own creative capacities, and the sense of the value that each one of us has.
yeah. I mean, it would be amazing, wouldn't it, to see movement medicine taught in schools and giving people at that young age
Yeah,
a chance to really step into their power when there's so much of a kind of crisis in terms of what we call them mental health problems. But I think what we're seeing among so many teens is really a deep questioning of their parents' values, of social values. They know, something in them knows that we're on the wrong track as a society, and they're rebelling against that. And those symptoms come out in depression or anxiety, but really there's something much deeper. And I was talking to a shamanic practitioner who said we cannot have healthy culture without shamanism. Quite a bold statement, but one maybe you might also agree with.
well, yeah, I mean, in order to agree with it, I have to kind of say, I just say something of what I feel that means, which is shamanism is the way, and there are many, many, of course, forms of shamanism, but universally, shamanism is the way that we've connected through direct experience to the bigger picture in which our lives exist, to the web of life on which we depend. It's the way that we have been able to live in balance, in self, in community, and in the wider community of life, our environment, our ecology, our sustainability. So shamanism exists in many, many, many ways, which all lead to that same experience, which is the direct experience of a bigger force that guides my life, that helps me to recognize who I am and what's important. So, when you talk about movement medicine being taught in schools, and movement medicine is a contemporary form of, we call it everyday shamanism, which means it's not just about the high on a workshop. It's not just about the vision. It's about the pathway to bringing vision step by step into manifestation in this world. on this earth. And, we're very delighted, how that process is going. We have an apprentice who's teaching a movement medicine in prison, in Brixton Prison, and doing incredible work with the inmates.
That's amazing.
Extraordinary work. And
well, I mean, this is something I wanted to ask you about, is that crossover between a practice or set of practices which really have belonged in the counterculture, and even in a pretty small corner of the counterculture until relatively recently. And I wonder if you could talk a bit about the kind of contemporary scene, if you like. There does seem to have been an increase in interest in this, but at the same time, I mean, I remember meeting you I think around a campfire in a teepee in a field in Devon.
That's right.
I was like, who is this guy? Like, walked with this kind of presence into this essentially teepee, and we got chatting and so on. Yeah. I mean, I was already in a teepee, so I was halfway enrolled into the whole idea of shamanism. So I was a pretty easy person to kind of get dancing. But presumably there's some people who find the idea of getting up, moving around, drumming with a contemporary shaman pretty kind of far out. Are you crossing that divide?
Well, it's certainly my intention, and in order to cross it, we have to find the language that enables people to understand how shamanism might be of interest and of value to them in their lives. And certainly we are engaged very deeply in that process. We started off by wanting to pass on our work to a wide community of teachers and facilitators, people who use our work in lots of different situations. And we have many, many projects on the go in terms of how we're going to cross that bridge and make this idea. I mean, even the fact that dancing could be a meditation, moving, being in the body is of value. Finding the language for that is a challenge, and it's one we're certainly up for. And we have an ongoing intention to be able to find the ways of bringing movement medicine into education, into not just for children, but in universities, in adult education as well, because it's actually a very simple practice, and it is very accessible. It doesn't take 2 hours even. You can 15 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the morning, just to get up and be with the body and be with rhythm. It's such a medicine.
I've had a taste of this, but for someone who's never experienced this before, they turn up, they're intrigued, they turn up to a movement medicine workshop.
Yeah.
What can they expect to happen?
They can expect, if they've never stepped into that kind of environment, they probably have a similar experience to I had when I stepped into.
Well, one of the things I really like about your book is that you're very candid about how difficult and kind of how many setbacks and upsets and pitfalls you've encountered on your own journey to this work.
Well,
you talk about how self-conscious you were and how you never used to dance apart from to one obscure song by one obscure band, right?
That's very true. And so I really recognize what it takes to get over that. And, what I found, and I think what anyone will find if they're willing to take that risk of facing their own self-consciousness, is self-consciousness doesn't last very long. You go into a room and you see like, wow, these people dancing. That was my experience. There was all these people stretching and doing their thing. And I was like, oh my God, what have I walked into? But actually within a few minutes, being guided to shift my attention from the part of me that's thinking about what I should be doing, what shape I should be, what clothes I should be wearing, what moves I should be doing. How do I fit in here? Do I fit in here? All this awful, oppressive, self-conscious internal dialogue that we suffer from. It doesn't take much to shift the focus from there into the capacity that is innate in all human beings to simply be moved by rhythm and to breathe. And that's all it takes a few minutes of that and you're in. You're kind of going, because my experience was like, oh my God, this body knows how to move and I don't have to worry about what I look like. Actually, it doesn't matter what I look like. All that matters is the incredible feeling that I'm getting in my body, the power, the creativity, the life force that's awoken in me simply by letting myself be moved by rhythm. It's, it's as basic as that. And that's the ground. That as soon as you've stepped over that threshold, then you start to realize just how much intelligence, wisdom, life force there is in the body. And when you bring the body, heart, your emotional intelligence and your mental intelligence together, you are lit up. You are connected. And that's the amazing thing about this. It doesn't take a lot. It only takes that willingness to face your own self-consciousness and be uncomfortable for a few minutes until you get over it, which is not a long time.
And it's you're often the one you're often playing the drum, right? I mean, that's often when you're leading the workshop. I think that's just worth specifying, because I still get chills whenever I hear that doom, doom, doom rhythm. Yeah. There's something so primal.
There is. And
it activates something quite deep within us, I think. We've forgotten.
Exactly.
That we almost remember when we start to hear it.
Well, the drum's like the drum's the first instrument we heard. When we were in the womb, we heard our mother's heart, the doom, 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 doom. So we know that so deeply in our experience, just on a physical level, just on an emotive level, that there's that calling to that feeling of, I'm held, I'm okay, I'm receiving what I need. And of course, the drum is the oldest instrument that we have as a species, and we've been moving our bodies to rhythm since we landed on this earth. And so, yeah, it connects to something that's underneath what we like to call our civilized modern approach to life. Underneath that, there is such a wildness, there is such a life force, there is such an intelligence. And yeah, the drum just helps us to, it changes. 7 minutes of shamanic drumming changes your brain waves. So it literally changes the way that you are experiencing or perceiving life. It opens you up to a more creative possibility. So this is automatic. It's not something you have to make happen. You just have to be there and be willing to give it a go. The power of the drum as a calling, as a remembering of something that's behind our civilized, withheld, cautious, self-conscious approach to life, that's so connected, that's so wild, that's like that's connected to that bigger picture. And the drum, 7 minutes of shamanic drumming changes your brain waves. It changes your perception, and it puts us back. It deepens, it relaxes, and it brings us back to our feet, brings us back to the earth. It brings us back to the power of life that's inside us. It doesn't take much. That's the thing.
But you're making me realize how much I've missed it.
Well, you're always welcome, Matthew. It's been a pleasure to have a chat with you, and to, I one of the things I appreciate is that you're really somebody who's wanting to build this bridge between things that have been more, as you described, more countercultural or more on the edge of society, and bring them into the mainstream, into situations where people will never go to a workshop, would never enter into that counterculture. And I really appreciate that. And we're on a similar mission. So it's been a pleasure to hang out with you today, and really thank you for taking the time. And just tell us your website so that people can find you.
It's www.matthewgreenjournalism.com. I'll also put this on my blog, because I'd love to spread the word to the military mental health community that there's certainly new ways to look at healing from trauma.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. And anyone listening to this and you haven't seen what Matthew's up to, do check out his website and check out his book. And wishing you well, and been a pleasure.